So thank you everyone for dialing into our panel discussion on alternate learning today as part of London's EdTech Week. We're going to take a bit of a three-stage approach to looking at alternate learning. Firstly, I suppose a short tour through the last 18 months or so and a look at how alternative education approaches are being used by organisations more generally. And then a shift in focus towards careers in tech specifically and the impact of some of the changes we're going to discuss. And then we'll get to our kind of destination point with a bit of future thinking and some thoughts on what's next and what might happen in the future for organisational and societal learning. But before we do that, some quick introductions from our panel. So Ruth, perhaps we'll start with you and then yourself, Paul. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be in the role you're in today and what keeps you motivated to do more in this space.
Thanks, Sandy. So hi everybody, I'm Ruth South. I head up early and emerging talent at Capgemini UK. I've worked for Capgemini for the last 13 years and interestingly for me, coming into this role was very much as a result of the support that I had within my support network. I've done about 5 different jobs within Capgemini, and I think that recognises the agility that we have as an organisation and one that really sees the potential in people. So got asked to lead this area, completely different to anything I'd ever done before. Although I've always had a real affinity with people from a really young age and always wanted to make a difference to people. And I think whilst going into teaching like my family did was not probably where I was going to take my career, I still feel like I still have that element of looking after people early in their career through the job that I do today. So I'm responsible for around 750 people going through graduate and apprentice programs. And I think for me, the thing that keeps me going, as I've already said, is making a difference to people and seeing people join on the first day with us, very nervous, excited, really unsure of what the future holds. And then seeing them 4.5 years later, for some of them, achieving first-class degrees, progressing through the organisation massively, really gives me a sense of purpose. So really passionate about the area that I work in and really pleased to be part of the discussion today.
Amazing, thank you. And Paul.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. My name's Paul Evans. I am the CEO of a social mobility charity called Leadership Through Sport and Business. We connect hundreds of young people every year from disadvantaged backgrounds to meaningful careers with major firms. These are careers that match their talents and aspirations. And we're talking about young people here that have a range of barriers in their life, come from really difficult circumstances and probably don't always get the opportunities to access the careers that they really want to. And I got into this career really when I retrained as a youth worker back in 2004 and started delivering alternative education within pupil referral units and in a social enterprise cafe, and through then developed my career within mental health and homelessness and education, and then ended up culminating here as the CEO of this amazing social mobility charity. And what keeps me going is I absolutely love it when a young person gets their first role, their first job, and they say they've been able to, pay their rent or buy their mum and dad something or buy a sibling a present or get the independence that comes with having your own money. So seeing that transformation in practical terms is really, really motivating for me and seeing the work we do.
Amazing, thank you both. And very briefly, I suppose, Andrew Owich from QA. I spent many years in recruitment actually, and then various pre-employment and work placement contracts before moving into apprenticeships 5 years ago. And that was a real game changer for me because it came with the realization that employers and work-based learning possibly had the biggest single point of impact in changing the way that individuals are developing and meeting some of the skill shortages we see in the UK and working with employers to effect meaningful change outside of the traditional educational system. It kind of was a real privilege to me, and it's something that I've become more and more passionate about, working with employers and partner organisations to effect real change, and especially in a digital space where we're constantly being challenged by emerging technologies. So it's as much the desire to be part of that and to effect the change as well as seeing the tangible results on a per learner basis. And something I've always felt is that our success as a training provider, as an employer, as a partner organisation is so heavily based on the learners that we work for and represent, and that kind of, that keeps the motivation for me. So great, thank you, and again, thank you both for joining the panel today. I think we're kind of here on the cusp of what's being branded the emerging state, and I think there's been monumental change over the last couple of years in the educational sector, not least just the ability to continue teaching in some aspects and in some sectors, and I think one can argue that COVID has accelerated masses of change in some areas, but possibly hampered it in others. So perhaps to start the conversation, Paul, maybe you could just kick us off with some of the biggest changes you've seen in the last 18 months and maybe a shift towards a higher utilisation of alternate learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're quite right that this time we've been through has been a catalyst for massive change, and some of that's been really positive. So the positives for us, as we are that bridge between where a young person is now and a formal apprenticeship opportunity, the positive has been that engagement with the learning across geographies. We're working in new spaces, in new ways, with new people that we wouldn't have previously reached. So this pivot to remote learning, to virtual learning, to technology-enabled learning has been fantastic to offer personalised learning, tailored learning, but also, again, reach just young people that we wouldn't have before. The loss, I guess, the heads to every tails, is that there's something about the social aspect of learning that we've lost. We're youth workers at heart, right? There's something about being with people. We learn how to be social beings by being with people, learning through osmosis. So where we've been able to pivot successfully, and young people who was in two minds about what to do with their life have found it an accessible way of learning, getting into apprenticeships. There's also been that case for some young people where digital poverty has been prevalent, and some young people where they've said, I'm currently working and learning in a room which an hour ago I was crying in. So that's the flip side to these things. What does it mean to what are the pluses here for young people, but also what do we need to recognize going forward in this kind of new way of working and learning, I guess?
Yeah, interesting. I really agree. There have been so many changes to delivery and from a teaching perspective, and we don't always think about the changes from a learning perspective, and they're not the same thing. And I think so Ruth, from an organizational perspective, has the way you approach utilizing these learning or teaching solutions, do you think, has that changed as a result of some of these changes?
Yeah, I think we've had to be agile, like everybody. I think that really pleased that we were able to continue to hire the amount of grads and apprentices that we brought in last year. We still brought in over 200, but I think for us, it's been a complete transformation because we've had to recognise, similar to what Paul said, the virtual aspects of what we deliver now. Transforming that from a face-to-face environment has been really, really difficult. And again, to Paul's point, I think that when you're early in your career, you do feed off the environment with other people. You want to create that cohort feel. And I think for us, we've been very mindful of that. Part of our flagship program with Aston University, our digital degree program, is an 8-week immersive upfront training program. And that normally is on campus at Aston. And I think that we've had to work really carefully with all our providers to really understand the employee experience that these people are going to have to go through, because it's very different sitting in a classroom environment than it is like this. We've all had to be in the sort of remote teams space for a long time, and that for us as sort of experienced professionals, it's been tough enough. But you take someone out of education who've already gone through, quite a rocky time, probably at the end of that education because of COVID. You then put them in a job where the expectations are high and learning in an environment, to Paul's point, that may be in their bedroom. We've had to consider workspace. We've had to consider, mental health and well-being more so than we ever have done before. And I think it's really caused us to think, how do we continue to engage our community in a virtual nature? And that in itself has been a real challenge. But I think it's something that, we've all had to adapt to. I'm really proud of the way that we've managed that. I think that, the levels of retention have been really positive. We haven't seen huge dropouts from programme. But what we have had to do is create more of a layer of virtual community, virtual engagement, support networks, making sure that our community really understand who to go to if they need that support, because they can't, it's quite difficult to pick up sometimes the signs of someone struggling over virtual settings. So yeah, so it's a lot of consideration, a lot of agility, but I think generally we've had no choice as well. We've had to carry on. The tech skill needs are not going away. We've been an industry and a sector that's benefited, I guess, in some strange way from COVID, because all of our clients are now needing to digitize their businesses even more. So, it's been a great opportunity for us to continue our investment, but one that we recognise has had to have some agility adapted to it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think from an apprenticeship delivery perspective, we've seen higher levels of motivation and engagement from our students, and generally our delivery teams they've had more time to engage with learners and build in that virtual layer of community. But they are learning and consuming in a different way, and a lot of the employers that we speak to and work with kind of initially were asking us to go back to the classroom, but it's been kind of in discovery of that. It's not the classroom they want to go back to, it's the sense of community, it's the interaction with other learners. So we're looking at ways now how we create those, whether we do that on a geographic location or by employer or groups and vertical markets. It kind of remains to be seen, but I think there is an absolute need to ensure there's that multiple levels of engagement, and learners learn from each other as well as tutors and digital content, and we've got to encourage that interaction too. And I suppose it's interesting. I think the conversations we've had with a lot of our employers now, they are, I suppose, becoming more aware of some of the available options, and we start to see shifting towards what I kind of like to call a funded first philosophy, but essentially where organisations are looking at apprenticeships, Kickstart, other initiatives, and trying to work out how to get the most talent in their organisation, and then essentially plugging the gaps with niche skills training on a commercial basis. But it can be really challenging to navigate all of the appropriate learning options that are available at the moment. So I guess, Ruth, I want to talk to you about how that's happening at an organisational level. But before we do that, maybe, Paul, you can just jump in. I mean, do you think it's working? Can we really use alternate forms of learning to provide the skills we need on a national scale from what you're seeing?
Absolutely, and I think we have to, and we are doing. I mean, if I think about some of the ways we're working at the moment, and in fact we're working together, Andrew, with QA, what our partnership, to use a case study in this sense, is a ring-fenced budget within the NatWest Group to get diverse talent into the business. So to recruit young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, to engage them, hundreds of them, onto new digital and tech qualifications, a range of qualifications right up to degree level, which is fantastic. All remote and virtual at the moment, but a new way, a new purpose-based approach to saying, look, we're in the situation we're in, but the country has a digital skills crisis. We're losing money out of the economy because of it. That's not going away. And we have a diversity issue within digital and tech. These things shouldn't exist at the same time. You shouldn't have a growth sector with a skills crisis and the diversity problem. We're only 5% of leadership positions within digital and technology are occupied by women. It's crazy. So we have businesses reaching out to us like NatWest that say, let's do something about it. And there's national partners that are saying, spotlight that the pandemic has shone on the inequalities that exist in society, coupled with the Black Lives Matter movement, with also the recognition that we hear now nearly every week that Britain is stuck in social mobility terms. Businesses are now saying, we've got to get more talent in, more diverse talent. We've got to think ahead. We've got to be more reflective of the communities that we operate within. And now they're reaching out. And also an element of pressure, regulatory pressure from society to say, what are you doing about this? We want to be a country that is well equipped to be at the forefront of digital and tech, but it's got to look, the business has got to look like the communities. It's got to have diverse talents. It can't be all people from Russell Group universities. What are we doing about this? So society's got very inquisitive, putting a lot of pressure on, and businesses are responding to that. And many are actually proactively looking to remedy that situation.
And I think that was beautifully led into I think who is a really proactive employer in this space. So I mean, Ruth, at an organisational level, what are the various kind of forms of programs you're using at the moment? How do they complement one another?
Sure, I think so. Apprenticeship wise, we've been big ambassadors of apprenticeships the last 10 years. We've been really focused on the degree level though for a number of years, and one of the big things that I've wanted to put into play over the last 18 months has been the diversity of the programs that we have. So looking at more level 3, level 4, which has been fantastic. We've seen great take up. We've grown our apprenticeship portfolio from five years ago to 23 today, across all different types of the areas, particularly focused on digital, as you'd expect. I think that, the apprenticeship agenda is crucial for us, but as is, the processes that lead us into attracting and hiring people. So, to Paul's point, wanting to create that more diverse environment, I think for us is absolutely crucial. We know that with diversity comes so many benefits, and as an organisation that works with clients across the world, that is something that means the most to us. So diversity is absolutely fundamental. And to that point, we've been very open about saying about our intentions to go ahead with Kickstart as well. I think the Plan for Jobs does give employers a lot of options. There are a lot of options though, and I think that's part of the complexity, is to work through what's best for you and how that works. But I think for us, the Kickstart opportunity enables us to look at how do we bring people into Capgemini that would never ordinarily even consider us as an employer. We're not an off-the-shelf product name. If you're not in the IT sector, you may not have heard of us. But I think what we offer is an amazing opportunity to fast-track people's careers, strong values, strong ethical guidance, strong diversity agenda. And I think for us, that's another way of us bringing in more diverse talent into the organisation. And I think it's just generally about us being, aware and open-minded to the impact, all the way through to social mobility, as I know is obviously very close to Paul's heart, because it's not just about gender or race. It is about actually looking at people's backgrounds, especially now. We recognise there's a massive unemployment and underemployment crisis. We know that there's 1 billion plus jobs out there as well. So, in a sector where we cannot grow the skills we need fast enough, it's an absolute organisational must-have that we're doing the work we're doing. And I think that, we have to do this to survive as an organisation. So lots happening on our front, and that will continue. I mean, just to say, as a final comment, this year is the biggest year we've ever had in the hiring of graduates and apprentices in the history of our programmes. And what that says to me is that the company is massively committed to bringing in people from all stages of backgrounds, all stages of career. We know apprenticeships are for all as well. We're not just talking about young people, but we're talking about giving opportunities to people who may find themselves impacted by COVID, but also those people that are coming through the normal educational routes as well.
And really kind of carry across that sense of urgency and the need for organisations to do more in terms of developing new talent. And it's interesting, you talk about the 1 million job vacancies that have been published over the last couple of days, but then when you add to that, I think the Open University did a study late 2019 saying that over 12 million job roles would change over the next 5 years as a result of emerging technologies and ways of working. And that was kind of almost before COVID really created the impact it has. So you're talking about a seismic shift in capabilities that individuals will need to move into work. And there is, I think, a kind of prevalent question that almost asks whether the current schooling and educational system is doing enough to provide the skills that employers need. And actually the alternative learning methodologies that we're talking about have been born out of the absolute need to develop new skills in new ways to meet the demands that futures will face in the future. So I mean, with that context in mind, I think, and probably a question for both of you, I mean, do you think there are types of education or types of alternative learning programs that are better served to support those individuals wanting to enter tech roles? And maybe start with yourself, Ruth, in terms of the types of individuals you brought in through Kickstart.
Yeah, I think, I guess anybody could turn their hands to be technical. I mean, obviously, you know, we talk about STEM, we talk about, you know, the basics of understanding of those subjects, but I think, you know, the only thing that we really look for in our recruitment process is passion. So going back to the sort of the basics here, I think that, you know, yes, we could definitely do more in schools around education. I mean, we spend a lot of time, as I'm sure, you know, Paul and his team does, around, you know, making people aware of the opportunities that they have that aren't the traditional routes, you know, and to your point, you know, Andrew, jobs are changing so rapidly. I mean, it's particularly in the tech sector, you know, jobs that exist now, you know, may not exist in 10 years because the technology will have changed. So I think there is a responsibility for us to do more around the awareness of tech. And this isn't new. We've been talking about this for ages. You know, I think getting it more on the agenda at schools, and I know it's getting better, but I think for us, you know, we like to be open-minded in our approach to recruitment. We do a lot of, you know, strengths-based assessment. So it's not about actually the competency that you're bringing to the mix. It's about the strengths that you have, and, you know, people that are natural problem solvers, people that are, you know, creative with their solution. It is that side of things that I think really maps itself into tech. I think people assume to be technical, you need to be a coder, which, you know, I mean, we can teach people that. What you can't teach people is the passion and the sort of basic concepts of strength, you know, going back to how we originally started talking, Andrew, around cybersecurity. You know, you're not going to learn about cybersecurity at school, but actually what you'll learn and what you'll have are those skills that enable you to be very good at problem solving and getting to the root cause of issues, which is, you know, I guess it's all in the explanation to young people. And I think, you know, I think we're starting to see that shift. I think, you know, we've got a massive challenge with gender. I mean, that is the biggest thing for us, huge challenge, but one that we are looking to meet. You know, we're getting more to 50-50 for our grad and apprentice community, new hires, but it's, I think we still have to get in there earlier, because people are counting themselves out of what could be an amazing opportunity career-wise because of their gender or their background. And I think that's something we really need to change.
May I just come in on there, Andrew? Just
absolutely.
I think it's so heartening when you hear great employers like this, as Ruth is talking about, looking for passion, you know, looking for aspiration and that talent and that want to do something, because talent is dispersed across our society in abundance. It's just the opportunity isn't. So we do have that, but raising the profile of these opportunities is a challenge. But actually, when forward-thinking employers can think beyond UCAS points, sometimes can think beyond the normal pathways in, that's when they can get that type of talent, and young people feel welcomed and, you know, ready to start in day one in their career, without having to justify why they didn't take a certain pathway. But the profile thing is interesting, because what we find is young people don't know what to search for. They don't know what's out there. They don't search for digital skills analyst, manager, or whatever. They search by passions and interests, and this is what you find is a disconnect. So young people search by passion-based searching and interest, and employers list by job description and task. And the names don't make sense to anybody, because a young person doesn't search by the title. But when you talk to young people, like in our programs and our youth work provision, say, well, you're into gaming, you know, you're a gamer, that's fantastic. You know, or you're into, you know, apps, and you're learning about app development. And well, the role that you're looking for then, your strengths-based criteria, to your point, Ruth, is this, but it's called this, and you might have never heard of it, you know. So some of the things we do in our preparation boot camps, for example, is we bring employers in to talk to young people to say, this is what this role is, this is what it's called, this is what it means day to day, and this is how you might be so aligned with this, you would have just never knew it existed. So exposure to young people, which you should have had at school, by the way, but exposure, you know, if it hasn't been at school, is so necessary, because then you can see the just world opening up. Like, wow, there's 15 jobs in tech I didn't know even existed, and I didn't know people that looked like me thrived in them too. And that's a really interesting thing. So the role modeling, that feedback loop to say, I came in this pathway through an apprenticeship, you know, and I come from this background and I've done well. I'm going to tell you all about it. Bit of a ramble there. I hope I'm still on point.
I think that sounds great, and I think you're so right about job titles. The demystification of tech job titles is probably something that we could all, do a bit better. I think we the descriptions don't naturally lend themselves to the content, and I think just to add, for Kickstart, my vision on that and Capgemini's vision is that we don't want to bring people into that program who could apply to our apprenticeship and graduate programs. I mean, that's not what this is about. This is about saying, okay, we have zero educational expectations. We expect people to come with the passion and the determination and, to get a foot in the door and have an experience vocationally with a company like ours. And I think that is what's so exciting about Kickstart to us, is it's completely different to internships and placements and apprenticeships and graduate programs. It's actually just saying, you may not have heard of us, but we want to give you a shot. And I think, I had that shot with Capgemini back in, 2008. We've given that shot to a lot of people before. I think sometimes you just need that window of opportunity. And to Paul's point, just making that, out there more for people to be able to grab it with both hands and not feel like there's any restrictions from them doing that as well.
I couldn't agree more with both of you. I think one of the things that always gets me about job descriptions is they're very focused on what an organization needs to be done, right? And actually most young people are looking for what they can do, what they might do, what they want to do in the future. And there's an almost very clear disconnect between this forward-looking view that a younger person has, and that starts from really young. I mean, most primary school kids are thinking about what they want to be in the future or who they're going to become, and most employers seem to be saying, well, we want someone that looks like this, or we want someone that's got these duties, and we've got to find a way around that. I think it's really interesting, and I think perhaps begs the question actually of the digital skills gap we're facing now. Was that largely created by a lack of access to education rather than the lack of education itself? Because we've all learned stuff, we all know how to do stuff, and if we can increase the volume or increase the accessibility of learning to the digitally excluded, to the broader communities who aren't currently or don't feel confident in applying to organizations or know who those organizations are, then maybe it's not just about buying programs, I guess is what I'm saying, as much as it is about changing the way that organizations recruit and hire and commit to train, So I think kind of gone full circle here, but I mean, Paul, what do you think about alternate learning and greater accessibility? Do you think this is the way forward?
I think greater accessibility, new opportunities, new ways of being engaged and involved are always going to be a great thing. Technology has proven to be a fantastic thing. At the same time, it comes with its challenges. So we have to think about the fact that, there are households where their income is between £6,000 and £15,000 that don't have internet access. So what is the infrastructure needed for those that don't have much to be able to for them to be able to engage and access as well? There's one thing, the opportunity to be in there. Can you access it? Have you got the money to? Are you set up to be able to? And I'm always going to come back to these types of points because I think the access is reliant on everybody having that access. You imagine if we did, we wouldn't have a skills gap because everybody would be involved, because everybody wants to be in the game. It's just not everyone gets a chance to. But I think if we mobilized and we had an opportunity where everybody could access in the same way, then we'd see a greater uptake in these apprenticeships within digital and tech, and we close that gap, no problem. But we need to close our own gap in terms of social mobility and access first. But I'm a big advocate of this, by the way. I think this tech-enabled learning and alternative learning is just fantastic opportunities for tailored, personalized learning, which works with your learning style, which brings to life collaboration, etc. But not at the detriment to the social aspect. We are social people. Knowledge is social. Knowledge is language, and language is people. And so somehow we must still embed that.
Completely agree. I read a book, a chap called Alex Beard wrote a book called Natural Born Learners, and he says something in there that has resonated with me ever since I read it, and it's learning is fundamentally the soul of our species. We are what we learn, and we need to encourage that from a young age so that we can create the next generation. It's not so much as the meek inheriting the earth, as the young will inherit the organisations that we're all working for now. And we've got to teach them how to manage those better and in a more sustainable way than they are at the moment. So it's a big responsibility. I think we all need to kind of grab hold of that and lead it forward.
Can I just add? Go on, Paul.
No, Ruth, I've just been talking a lot. You go.
That's right. I was just going to say, I think that the key thing for me is that what we've seen through apprenticeships, as an example, is everyone's got a different way of learning. Some people are really academic. Some people want to do a degree. Some people want to do a master's. Some people actually just want to come in, do a job, and actually learn on the job, but it not be in a, in an academically necessary state as a degree. And I think that, that in itself means that there's a more natural way of them learning without actually making them feel like they're in a classroom environment and learning all the time. And I think that is the sweet spot. So it's about looking at the types of people that you have, recognizing the opportunities that you have for those people within your organization, and applying this layer of programs to suit. Because I think, learning can be, as we know, apprenticeships are all about learning on the job. And I think that is where programs like this just absolutely work, because you're learning the theory, there is a classroom element, but you're seeing how that's going into place in the job. And that is why we and other companies like us have put so much investment into apprenticeships, because we see the difference it makes to people, but we're also seeing people. I mean, some of our apprentices, I was speaking to one the other day, she's had 9 promotions since she joined the company back in 2015, I think. And that is unheard of. They're not just people that are kind of manning the back office. These are, for us, people front office with our clients, making a massive difference. And I think that, it's just about showcasing these examples, which, Andrew, we're massive ambassadors. Me personally, getting the names of people that are out there and the profiles to say, these are people that have done it, you can do it too. And I think it's just, going back to the original point, just making learning just intrinsically part of what you do without you necessarily realizing that you're doing it. And I think some people are quite scared of it. I don't want to leave school and then learn more, but actually I think if you're in that camp, this is the perfect way of doing it, because you've got that structure. And it's just all about learning that content on the job. And that's why it works for us so well.
I've got to come in on that, because you're so right here. So I'm thinking about some of the young people that are on apprenticeships right now, loving it, loving being in the workplace. And one young guy said to us, "I stay at work later than I have to, just so I can wear my suit for longer."
Wow.
That's the feeling of being in the workplace, about working and learning and earning. I'm taking mum out. I mean, we hear such the simple stories. We can take someone out for a meal, mum out for a meal. We can do this, because they're learning, and that they're feeling part of this environment where they're learning without realizing it half the time, even away from the formal apprenticeship. So I completely get that, and that's. So I was talking to a lady fairly recently, and she was saying, "I've got friends that have come out of uni. They're struggling with public speaking. I'm talking in meetings all the time. She's navigating organizational design and culture, thinking about how things work, problem solving, real problems that have actual consequences. So
yeah.
What a pathway, what a thing to be involved with. And by the way, I don't know if you've came across some young people on apprenticeships where you think, how the hell are you behaving, articulating and performing like this at your age? I was worried about whether I'd get the shelf stacking job at Summerfield. How are you doing this? Far beyond where we would have been at that age sometimes in confidence.
I completely agree, Paul. Honestly, I think that is such a key point. In my job, you mentioned privilege earlier. It is an absolute privilege to see the amazing things that these young people are doing. I mean, honestly, it's astounding half the time to get a first-class degree, to be running the work that they're doing internally with clients, to be the ambassadors externally, and also to facing off to their parents and people who were skeptical from the outset. back in the days when I was considering my options, my parents felt very, very conflicted. I wouldn't probably be able to change their minds, but yet somehow people coming through now are just really championing, this is the right decision for me. All my siblings went to uni traditionally. I believe this is the right route. I mean, my mind is blown regularly, and that's an example. Challenging, the cultural side of things as well, with families who expect, there is expectations on people to go to university, and I totally agree. I'm blown away, and normally I think that's the thing. You tend to not be able to spot the apprentices within Capgemini. I think that's absolute testament to them. There is no difference. They are young people progressing through their career who absolutely deserve where they've got to. And I think that the loyalty they display as a result of the investment that we as a company make just pays back dividends massively. So yeah, totally agree.
Amazing. And I agree with obviously both of you in terms of everything you're saying there. I think one of the things that continues to amaze me is the fact that in marketplace, I think we start to see either learning or employment as options, and apprenticeships originally, and I think there is still some stigma sadly out there that they're almost a second class employment opportunity. They're for people with no skills and no prospects. And actually, I think in the way you've just described it there, both of you, Ruth, Paul, is that actually it comprises the best of employment and the best of education, and to create something really quite special on a per learner level as a means of almost crafting organizational cultures of learning, because that learner crosses so many different paths. Their involvement with so many different stakeholders within an organization, the impact that knowledge sharing has in terms of creating real teams is fundamental. And encouraging that, I suppose, that diversity of thought as well as diversity of individual across teams and organizations to help move forwards and come up with new ways of doing stuff. One of the things I'm really keen on seeing with our developer learners actually is, let's look at all the stuff that was done in the last couple of years and just give our apprentices the opportunity to improve it as a project, bring them all together, evaluate stuff, and stop some of the organizational inertia that we see in the way things have always been done. So yeah, I think some really exciting times. And look, from the outside looking in, I think preaching to the converted here, it definitely works. But there are some challenges, and we need to be conscious of those. And I suppose for other organisations looking to implement new alternative learning methodologies, or looking to recruit in a slightly different way to help overcome some of the other challenges they face, we need to start thinking a little bit more about the future. And I've got 3 questions left actually, so I'm going to ask one each, and then we'll both all come together and look at the last question. But Ruth, I might start with yourself. From an organisational level again, what do you think the biggest issues there are? What are the challenges that you faced and overcome in terms of increasing alternative learning approaches, and apprenticeships, Kickstart, and some of the others as well?
I think fundamentally you need a team of people. That for me is my team. Companies have to invest in that infrastructure. This is something that is a huge undertaking. You need to be really mindful of the expectations. You need to have, clear understanding of compliance, of all those kinds of things. But also you need to have really good understanding of what you're delivering, what you're offering, what your model is. And providing that pastoral care support is just crucial, fundamentally. I think the other thing is having really good organisational structure. So getting your exec board to sign up to this, it has to come from the top. The direction we have within the UK, our UKMD, Paul Margetts, is a massive ambassador and advocate for what we do in this area. He really understands what we're doing and really champions it, and has done for a number, since he's been in situ. So, having that buy-in is crucial. I think as well, getting your managers and people that are responsible for these people day in, day out to be really bought into it as well. Pay and progression. How are you going to recognise these people? How are you going to get them up to, from a number of points of view, not only salary, but, status position, where at the end of their apprenticeship programme, they have met all the requirements and they're out delivering for clients. How do you continue to give them that career trajectory that they need? And I think above all, and we've spoken about this a little bit, listen to the voice of your community as well. I think that, we spend a lot of time listening to our apprentices' views. I think it's about being clear on expectations, just being open. There are always going to be challenges, that's part and parcel. But I think what we see is if you invest in that structure, it's basics. It's not rocket science. It is basics. Just get the right people committed, get your policies lined up, career progression. And I think, we'll see the dividends really, really quickly. So that would be in a nutshell what I'd say.
Cool. Thank you, Ruth. And Paul, it was interesting. You mentioned UCAS points earlier, and I think I've kind of long thought that there will come a time, or maybe reaching that time already, where, for example, a degree apprenticeship earned in sector will become more valuable to prospective employees than a degree earned from the Russell Group or other forms of education. So I think that there is. I mean, what do you think maybe needs to happen to make alternative learning a bit more prestigious, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, or more widely recognised and implemented across society?
I think there is something around young people seeing the success stories. And when Ruth talked about promotion, and there's 9 levels of promotion and people being paid well and succeeding and being called this now and a director, do young people get to hear from these people that chose that pathway and did well and were promoted and having all the bigger picture things that make life fun? They're earning and they're going on holiday, they've got the car, all the things that the young people tell us on programs they want. It's so role modeling is a big thing here. I mean, exposure to understanding that connect between what you're interested and passionate about and what that role is. Bringing that together somehow. I think there is something around. I mean, I listened to a really interesting podcast you was on, Andrew, actually a while ago, and a contributor had said, question the word apprentice. Is that helpful or a hindrance for people to still be called an apprentice? It's a whole another philosophical discussion, by the way, not for 4 minutes. But there are these things where we should ask young people, what do young people tell? Is it a barrier or not? What do you think? Are these things help or a hindrance? Have you got the brand right? Are you seeing enough people like you who've succeeded? Is it exciting to you? So I don't think we make as much of the fact that people are being promoted, they're earning probably greater than their graduate friends, etc. But I also, as a proponent, I am for these things. It's not to set one against the other. It's not to start saying their route through university. Let's not tip the scales too much. We don't have to be adversarial about this. There are just great pathways that need to be equal parity, equal esteem. But that's the way, that's what you chose. I mean, you think back of the great inventors and people of the day, the people that built the cathedrals, right? Apprentices. We used to give such weight and esteem to people that were good with their hands or that weren't particularly academic, but were great in this other way. And all of that needs to come back. Greater esteem and parity given to size, but exposure is required. I'm off again, look.
No, I want to jump in, actually. I know we haven't got a lot of time, but I do want to say, I think one of the most promising things I've seen in the last 12 months has been UCAS have done quite a lot, actually, to challenge the perceptions of apprenticeship. So much so I was invited to speak at their admissions conference, which is the first time an apprenticeship orientated conversation had been had, which I think is really promising. And I think that there is that sway. And I absolutely agree, though. There has to be both routes. Capgemini as an employer, other employers, we still need the graduates. We still need graduates coming through. We still see that as a really valid route, but a route that not everybody can take. And I think that that's the key here, is that, people have often found going to university not possible for a number of reasons, and this opens those doors to them. And I think that one of the interesting things I was also involved with was a debate with UCAS that DebateMate ran, and it was, cited me against the Vice Chancellor of Nottingham Trent. And we said, we don't want to go against each other. This is, we don't want to do which is better, graduates or apprentices. I think that there's space for everybody. But I think what is clear is that there is a route for everyone to get to the dream job that they want. And I think that that's just the work that we all have to do collectively to make that apparent, even more so than it is now.
Absolutely, but I will just also chuck in there, agreeing with everything. But in terms of, can someone afford to take the apprenticeship route? You know, if the apprenticeship minimum pays less than they get at McDonald's, there has to be something that says this is a route, you know, an appropriate route for you and an exciting route, but it's also got to pay all right. You can't have to hold 2 or 3 jobs down to keep it all working.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, absolutely.
I completely agree. I've long been an advocate that there shouldn't be a national minimum wage for apprenticeships, that they are regular employees with a different structured form of learning that other maybe employers don't suit or will want something else. So I think you're absolutely right, and that's the beauty, I think, of alternate learning. It enables a broader accessibility of learning methodologies to a much larger ecosystem or population than we've ever seen before, because apprenticeships won't suit everybody, but the people that it don't suit will maybe prefer a certification course. They might look at digital learning, they might look at a different route way that's more supportive of some other learning needs they have. I think it's interesting, you know, one of the things that employers ask me still very often is where do they start? How do they get started navigating some of these different options? And I always kind of respond a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but meant genuinely, and just ask your employees fundamentally how many of them would put their hands up first for a type of training if they knew what was really available. And then you need to learn about how you provide that knowledge and educate not just the employees, but also their immediate families and their communities, so that they can make a collective, informed decision. We still hear stories, I think Ruth, you were saying earlier, still hear stories of schools not informing their students or their learners around the opportunities and the potential that are available through apprenticeships or other methodologies. And there are so many now. Yeah. So we're going to wrap up in 2 minutes. But I suppose one quick thing from either of you. Is there anything else that either of you think that we could all do collectively to make it more normal for individuals or organisations to consider alternate educational choices for their employees or their prospective new employees?
Okay.
I mean, what a killer question. I mean,
I know.
It's just, where do you start? I think you know, I personally will go back on what Paul said, actually. Sorry, I'm going to nick yours, Paul. I think the role modelling, honestly, if there's one thing that we could do more of, it is, you know, and we do this already, but I think it's just about normalising the people that actually go through this and what they've achieved. You know, we have National Apprenticeship Week, we have, you know, opportunities to showcase, but I think that for me, any company, you know, who are thinking about starting off, you know, it's amazing the momentum that the feeling, seeing people go through this program gives your employees, as well as it gives you, me as a lead, as well as it gives, you know, everybody and the individuals themselves and their families. You know, I think it is about just, I think it's stealth through messaging, and I think it is up to everybody to really get behind that and to really share it, and to the individuals themselves. You know, it's up to them to showcase and be ambassadors. But I think there's just that would be my sort of my suggestion, if anything, that we need to do more of.
Excellent. Thank you, Ruth. Anything you'd add to that, Paul?
That was my one, so thanks for that, Ruth.
Sorry.
I'll go another one. What I will say is, if we want them to be seen as equal, let's make it equal in terms of access. If apprenticeship starts declining with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, that means they're not being able to live. They haven't probably got parents that can say, you can work on apprenticeship minimum for a year because we'll support you. So if you really want it to be equal and really see it as parity and esteemed in the same way, then let's make it where everybody can actually access it.
Completely agree. So more accessibility, more stories. I think that's all something we can actively commit to promoting moving forwards. Paul, Ruth, thank you both so much for joining today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And for all of you that have dialed in, thank you very much also for joining us during the session, and enjoy the rest of Tech Week.